2 hours into it. And do you know what that really is? Let's say I do that every single day, though. Would you say that's good time management skills? Maybe that's good time management. That's utterly bad energy management. And at the end of a year, those 2 hours that you spent every single day would have been a complete waste of time as well. So in fact, you probably wouldn't have had better time management skills. Does this click for anybody? Do you get what I'm saying? Right. It's maximizing the efficiency. And let me just give a little personal example of this. That's a lot of people that I know, and this is true for me for a while. What do you guys, actually, let me ask you guys, what do you guys think about when you think studying? What is studying to you? What does it mean to study? If there's a math test coming up, and you want to do well on it, and you want to study for it, what do you do? What do you do, Justin? Alex, sorry.
Alright, so I just like, if it's on like a chapter test, I just like go through my notes.
Do you do it collectively?
Well, actually, I don't study for math then, because math's one of my easier subjects.
Well, let's switch.
But if I was going to study for it, I would just like review what my main weaknesses are in that one chapter, and then go through that, and then just sort of review a little bit on the stuff that I already know. And then sometimes studying with friends works because you have someone to talk to, and like they know what you're talking about. Like sometimes my parents try to help me with homework. They need to like catch up because they forgot. So then that helps too.
How do you study for your harder subjects?
For history class, I just review the notes. And then, but because our history teacher gives us lectures, so then I sort of remember from when he's talking about that too. So.
Okay. So you sit down, you study, you read things, you go over it with friends. William, how do you study?
I review the book.
You just review the book. You just read the book. Anyone else?
I read the book.
Who here reads the book, reads your notes, looks over homework? That's what you do when you're studying. Is that what you do, Emily? When you're studying for something? You don't study, period?
I'll study.
What about you, Cindy? You just...
I just like math. If I study.
What if I told you guys that this is how maybe 95% of people in the world study? This is what they do. They crack open a textbook for a chapter test or something like that. They read over the textbook. They read over the notes that they took on the textbook. They memorize, memorize, memorize. And on the day of the test, based upon everything that they memorized, they try to spit it back out on the test. 95% of the people in the world study like that. And when they think of studying, that's what they do. That is a form of study. That's the most prevalent form of study. But you know what I call it? Grinding. Does anybody here play video games? Does anybody here know what the word grinding means in video games?
Yeah, like level grinding.
Level grinding. Let me just explain for people who don't play video games. When you grind in video games, that means you spend a lot of time doing one task repeatedly, again and again and again to get, so that your character in the video game gets better at it. They level up, or they improve their skills on it. When you study like that, you're grinding. You're repeating one thing over and over again. Maybe you're repeating a word or a concept into your head. Let me tell you, 95% of people do that, but that's terribly inefficient. That's incredibly inefficient.
Do you guys remember any of the stuff you studied, like for hours and hours, like a week later?
Sort of.
Yeah.
You have vague memories, but a month later, 2 months later, a year later, how much of that do you remember? Very little. The details are all gone. Maybe have vague impressions of the general concepts. The details, which is really the valuable parts, those are the parts that very few people know, are gone from your memory, from your head. Grinding is how most people study, and it's a poor form of studying. I'm telling you, this is very, very true, and I think people don't realize this. When you go to college, I see this very often in college. I have friends that pull all-nighters or spend an entire day just studying for one subject. And they don't even do that well in those subjects. Or even if they do, I look at them and I think to myself, that was incredibly inefficient. You had absolutely no real system for studying. That's true for most people. Most people don't study systematically. They study haphazardly. That means when they think it's time to study, they read. But when they're not studying, they're never even thinking about the material at all. Let me tell you guys a story of a person that I met and I know who is probably somebody who's the exact opposite of this. This is a guy who he just graduated from college. He could walk into any test that in the class that he was taking, ace it, absolutely demolish the test, skew the curve. And before that, he would study for maybe an hour to half an hour. That's it, no more than that. If you add all the time that he puts into study just for that test, he puts it up to an hour, tops. Most of the time, it's about half an hour. He told me a story once of he was in a class where the final, the last test that you had to take that would determine the vast majority of your grade, had a 50% fail rate. Half of the people in the class who took the final would get a fail on the final. So most of his friends, what did they do? They grinded. The week before the final, they grinded. They took out their textbooks, they memorized, they remembered, they repeated on the test. Many of them did okay. Some of them failed. Some of them did good. What did he do? He spent about 2 hours in total study. He got an A+. Now, I'm also going to tell you something else. When you hear this story, you might be thinking to yourself, well, this guy's just an exception. He's a genius. He's clearly somebody who's different from us. He's probably much smarter than us, and he doesn't need this study. He probably knows everything. What if I told you that straight up wasn't true? I know him. He's not smarter than most people. The only difference between him and the people who grind is he has a system. There's a certain way that he studies, and there's a certain way that he does his homework, that he goes to lecture and listens, that he takes notes. And his system allows him to put almost no time into studying. And he instead puts a lot of time into doing things he likes. He runs a full-time business. He goes running very often. He picks up new foreign languages because he likes studying new foreign languages. He travels a lot. And he has a lot of interesting experiences going around and exploring the countryside. He probably has more time than most of my friends who are getting way worse grades than he is. But he excels at all these things. He's a very healthy lifestyle. This is a true story. This is absolutely true. Who here wishes you guys had something like that? A system like that? A way of thinking of doing things like that? Who here kind of wishes